halfway through my opening. So start over. We're not on. Okay, great, great. So welcome to our program this evening, Black Lives, Black Lungs. My name is Pastor George Nicholas, and I have the honor and the privilege to be the senior pastor here at Lincoln Memorial United Methodist Church. And I'm also the chair of the African American Health Equity Task Force and chair of the Buffalo Center for Health Equity, as well as many other roles that I play here in this community. Tonight, we want to talk about saving lives. You know, sometimes when the work that we do, especially when we're talking about public policy and executive orders or laws or stuff, there's this room for like compromise, right? Because you don't always get what you want, right? I think Mick Jagger say that, right? But there's certain times when there's public policy decisions to be made that they can't get caught up in politics, right? There's certain things that when you look at a good policy, especially as it relates to public health, that there really shouldn't be any going back and forth and stuff. When you look at the data, right? Now, who came on the car today? How many of y'all put your seatbelt on? Now, this one, don't lie in church. How many, no, not about this one. How many of you drove close to the speed limit? Right? And so these are all examples of policies that are good. They're good for our health. It's good for a rational, sane society. Smoking cigarettes won't do anything good for your health. Just won't. Won't make you faster. Won't make you better looking. It won't make you richer unless you work for the tobacco industry. But I get it because, you know, a lot of times people get caught in the culture of smoking for a lot of reasons. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. So we're not talking about targeting smokers. We're not trying to vilify people who smoke cigarettes. What we're saying is there is an industry that historically has abused black and brown bodies from its inception, right? Because who used to harvest the first tobacco that came out of this country? It wasn't unionized workers. And so from its inception, the industry has been kind of inherently immoral. And as we learned more and more about the negative health consequences of smoking, the Surgeon General kind of said, well, wait a second, this product causes cancer. It's labeled right on there, right? And a lot of people quit, others didn't. And so menthol, for those who are smokers, made it easier to smoke. And it became more addictive. And then they began to target the most vulnerable and created a whole campaign to get more smokers. In many countries, they've long banned flavored tobacco products, menthol. You don't have to go far. Just go across the Peace Bridge. In some states, they've already done this. California, pretty big state. Massachusetts, a pretty smart state. And so what's interesting is that the tobacco industry has no argument. When our friends at Roswell or any other health organization says that this product will kill you, they can't say, no, it won't. You're lying. Can't say that. So what they do say is they start bringing in and conflating all this other stuff about freedom of choice, or yeah, if we do this, we're going to round up all these black people and we're going to choke them to death. You don't want that happening in your community. Of course, they never point to any data. Just made up stuff. But the statistics show, and you'll hear people much smarter than me, but we know that 45,000 black folks every year, 45,000 die from this stuff. We know that's a community that already is struggling with diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, asthma. And guess what? These products make it all worse. And so the governor is wise in saying, well, let's kind of put some restrictions on the sale and distribution of this poison. That's what it is. Let's call it what it is. And so the tobacco industry makes stuff up. Just make stuff up. Just make it up. But tonight we're going to talk about the facts, the data. And then hopefully we can convince our friends in Albany to make some decisions that are going to help save lives, like they've done in other places. The health disparities in this state are completely unacceptable. And some of us are out here fighting for health equity, and meaning that we got to provide better housing and more access to fresh fruits and vegetables and cleaner air and water in communities, increase incomes for people in these communities. Can we do that work with not having to worry about folks being seduced by the tobacco industry to use a product that will bring hurt and harm to them and even those around them? So this isn't a political conversation tonight. This is a moral conversation. This is a public health conversation. This is a conversation about how we can save lives and enrich people's lives. And so we're grateful that you've taken the time to be with us this evening. We're going to give you some information. We're going to show you a great film. And then we have a time built into our schedule, not the last 5 minutes of the meeting, but time. And we want to hear from you. And we'll answer your questions. And I'll be honest with you, there may be a question you ask that we might not necessarily know the answer. Because sometimes people will ask you to look into the future. You say, well, if they do this ban, won't X happen or won't Y happen? I don't know. But here's what we do know. If we don't do anything, another 45,000 or more will die. This is what we do know. And so that's what we're going to talk about this evening. So we're going to start our time together viewing a film, and our AV people get that ready, called Black Lives, Black Lungs. And it's about, how long is this, Dan? About 15 minutes. And then from that, we'll have our panel discussion. And our panelists, we have a wide array of panelists, some that are here and some that we're going to be bringing in from around the country electronically, because it's that important of an issue. And then following the panel discussion, then we will have some time to hear from you. If you're viewing us online, just put your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond to you. For those who are here, if you have a moment with your phone, text, or tell somebody, tell folks if they can't get down here to go online. It's on the flyer. You can go on to our website here at Lincoln Church, and it'll take you directly to our sanctuary where we are. And then Ebony, if they go onto the BuffaloHealthEquity.org website, will that also direct us to this meeting as well? So we'll help you if you have some folks that are trying to get online to participate with us tonight, and you're having trouble. If they're having trouble doing that, just put your hand up, and we'll give you some assistance. Okay? So y'all ready to work? So I know it's not Sunday morning, but this is a church still. And in our culture, we do a little call and response. And here's a little cue when you go to a church. The more you respond, the shorter the sermon goes. So we ready to work? All right, thank you. All right, let's watch this film together.
And that's not a coincidence. During my time with Truth, 3 years ago, I accepted an internship with Truth Initiative. At the time, I thought I knew everything I needed to know about tobacco. Yes, it could be deadly, but my generation was rejecting it in much larger numbers. But what I knew was just the beginning. Today, tobacco-related diseases are still the #1 cause of death in the African American community. And that's not a coincidence. During my time with Truth Initiative, I read dozens of research articles and stacks of internal documents directly from tobacco industry files. I learned that the tobacco industry strategically and successfully infiltrated my community. And while it's true that they targeted many groups, the targeting of the Black community has been uniquely damaging.
Critics charge that the tobacco companies view Black smokers as a growing source of income. In fact, they say, Blacks are the target of carefully plotted and highly specific marketing campaigns.
For decades, the tobacco companies have used predatory practices aimed to push their deadly product onto the Black community. Practices that contribute to the approximately 45,000 Black people who will die every year from tobacco-related diseases. This film, Black Lives, Black Lungs, is part of my effort to turn my anger into action. I've set out to give voice to some of the experts and activists who've spent their lives taking on the tobacco industry, because understanding the history of this 50-year-plus campaign is critical for taking back the health of our community.
In high school, I became involved in tobacco control because my uncle passed away from tobacco-related diseases, and I remember him telling me when I was younger that when he first started, it was because the industry told him it would cure his asthma. And if you were to hear that statement today, you would think that's the most ludicrous thing you've ever heard. And I just felt like it was so unfair for an industry to be able to target someone like my uncle and have him die as a result. If he had known the real health effects from the get-go, he would have never picked it up. I lost my uncle to an industry who does not care about him, who does not care about the black body. And I feel I have a responsibility to speak out against it.
Addiction is about brain chemistry, and it's about access. It's not about personal weakness. It's not about poor black people just are going to do something anyway. It's about that you give this entity access to the brains of your children, of your people, and they become addicted.
There's nothing inherently black about menthol cigarettes. They were invented in 1925 by Lloyd Spud Hughes. Spud created his own brand, Spud brand, which were the first widely sold menthol cigarettes in the United States. In 1932, Brown & Williamson Tobacco launched its own menthol brand, Cool. And in 1956, industry behemoth R.J. Reynolds introduced Salem, the first menthol cigarette with a filter tip. R.J. Reynolds marketed Salem as fresher, cool, and refreshing. Of course, all without any scientific proof.
Salem's special paper breathes in fresh air with every puff.
The death rates for African Americans who smoke hover around 49,000 per year. It's no accident that African Americans smoke more menthol cigarettes.
One of the greatest marketing coups that took place in the 20th century is transforming menthol cigarette to the black cigarette. The African Americanization of menthol cigarettes in the United States starts with finding a specialty product for African Americans following World War II. Many African Americans had moved to the north. There were specialty products being developed for them, certain hair creams, certain foodstuffs, and the tobacco industry, particularly some of them, began to realize we could market a particular brand to this group of people. Brown & Williamson conducted a number of focus groups in the late 50s and early 60s that identified that African Americans were more receptive to TV commercials, more receptive to the messages that are provided there. Brown & Williamson then took 90% of their budget and put it into television advertising because they knew African Americans would disproportionately look at that. They began to use black images on television and in their ads. In 1953, 5% of African Americans used menthol products compared to 3% for whites. By 1968, that had tripled to 14%. By 1976, it had tripled again to over 42%. Into the 2000s, we're above 80%. That's the African Americanization of menthol cigarettes in the United States. It's the targeted marketing over a half a century toward black folks.
Let's dig in a little bit deeper and talk about how African Americans are disproportionately burdened by death and disease from tobacco, cigars, and cigarillos. When it comes to understanding it as a public health issue, I didn't know about that, or a social justice issue in particular, until I started working with TRDRP and Truth Initiative. I didn't understand that the industry had been targeting my community.
In the middle of Jim Crow, there's a civil rights battle going on, and the tobacco industry is way past that. They've got Elston Howard, captured from the New York Yankees, black man selling cool cigarettes. They have executives in their offices in North Carolina that they're, promoting while black folks can't even get a job or sit at a lunch counter. So they're way ahead of the curve.
In 1971, the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act banned the advertising of cigarettes on TV and radio.
The tobacco industry was one of the first industries to recognize not all marketing needs to go toward white males. So it was good to see black people in the ads and to see that there were black models and that it wasn't all drugs and gangs. And so it was hard. People saw that and they were very much attracted to that.
For decades, the tobacco industry has infiltrated the black community, infiltrated black institutions. In return, what the black community got was death and disease.
We know the facts. We have the scientific knowledge that tells us that we die in larger numbers. If people stopped smoking, if people resisted using these products, it's a preventable disease. We wouldn't have to die in such large numbers.
Why do some things still happen in society that we know are wrong? It's all tied to money. Why is the tobacco industry able to sell a product that will definitely, undoubtedly kill you? Because there's money tied to it. And money makes things happen.
I found myself very touched and even upset over what I was seeing, because I saw lists of organizations that included organizations that I grew up in, organizations that I was currently a member of, and I had no idea that behind the scenes there were negotiations between the leaders of these organizations and tobacco companies where they were accepting money and sponsorships.
So in the summer of 1984, I was in my preventive medicine residency at Johns Hopkins. I was doing internships around the country. And so one of the organizations I did an internship was with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. While I was there, I was very concerned about the relationship between the CBCF and the tobacco industry. So I started talking to other interns who were there, and then also my supervisors, to sort of see, what can be done. Is it possible to do something from the inside? Because I knew that the effect that it was having on African Americans in general. And so what they suggested was that I write a memo to the executive director. So the memorandum reads, I am very much disturbed by the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's policy of promoting cigarette smoking. I am especially disturbed at the free distribution of cigarettes at CBCF functions. I am requesting that you raise these issues at the CBCF Policy Board in the hope that we will adopt a policy more in line with our interest in the well-being of Black Americans. And that's how it begins.
Unfortunately, somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of all African American civil, religious, political, social organizations take money from the tobacco industry. That's just because we ain't got no money. They're buying, they're buying the silence of these people. The Congressional Black Caucus is a multi-million-dollar foundation, and last time I looked, at least half of their members take money from the tobacco industry. Now, not all of them do, and we tried to work, of course, with the ones that don't, like Karen Bass from Los Angeles and Barbara Lee from up here, Alma Adams in North Carolina. But it's a hard sell, and it's still a hard push to get groups to speak up against the tobacco industry.
The tobacco industry has a very interesting and highly complex relationship with African Americans. Yes, the tobacco industry was the first, or among the first industries to give African Americans high-level executive jobs. They fund several Black scholarships, including the Thurgood Marshall Fund. They funded major civil rights organizations, including the NAACP, the National Urban League, the Congress for Racial Equality, and much more. They did give people in the entertainment industry their first leg up. But you can give me everything in the world, but at the end of the day, what is this industry doing? 47,000 African Americans a year die as a result of tobacco-related diseases. That is the leading cause of death in the African American community. There's not enough shiny trinkets in the world that you can give me in exchange for my life. There's not enough shiny trinkets in the world that you could give me in exchange for my brother's life, for my sister's life. It doesn't matter how much money you pump into the community. We are worth so much more. In my experience, people have been shocked to learn that, they fund so much, that their dollars reach so far. But I think that it needs to be known.
I'm sitting at my desk one day in 1998 when the Surgeon General's report comes out, first report on racial and ethnic minorities and smoking, and it just kind of slapped me in the face that African Americans were dying disproportionately of tobacco-related diseases across the board.
I was actually one of the first to start looking at what the industry had written in their own words about their plans to market their products to African American communities, and looking at their relationship building with African American organizations and organizations that I was currently a member of, and I had no idea that behind the scenes there were negotiations between the leaders of these organizations and tobacco companies where they were accepting money and sponsorships. Tobacco-related diseases was really, I saw a main cause for the health disparities that were affecting my community. I couldn't turn my back on this. I just couldn't. And one of my colleagues actually saw me crying at my desk at UC San Francisco because I was just so upset over what I was seeing, and she asked a question, I wonder if others in your community would have this kind of reaction to these documents. We then got funding to do another project where we took the documents to groups of African Americans, smokers, and young people, elderly people in the community to find out if they would have a similar reaction. And it was very clear that this was information that they didn't have, that they wanted it, that they wished that they had had prior to them picking up a cigarette.
I work with the group, the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. Our tagline is Saving Black Lives, and that at bottom it is a social justice question. You might look at it this way: when you have the tobacco industry targeting of African Americans, disproportionately advertising in our communities, giving away free samples, menthol products are less expensive in the African American community. It's a classic definition of a social justice issue where there is a major player taking advantage of a lesser person. Now, there has been some changes. The National NAACP passed a resolution at their July convention saying that chapters could support local and state resolutions to curb or regulate menthol. This is a major breakthrough.
You know, the legislation I'm signing today represents change that's been decades in the making. Today, thanks to the work of Democrats and Republicans, healthcare and consumer advocates, the decades-long effort to protect our children from the harmful effects of tobacco has emerged victorious. Today, change has come.
It's always been an uphill battle. Look at the black folks who fought to set up the Underground Railroad. Look at the black folks who fought Jim Crow. If we're going to fight this, then you're in it for the long haul.
Our communities are under great stress, so we need healthier lifestyles, but we don't need people dumping this poison in our neighborhoods.
If you know someone who smokes, who's black, they probably smoke menthol cigarettes. Tell their story.
I think when it comes to just living as an African American, understanding that just because of who we are, our lives are constantly at threat, whether it is racial injustice, police brutality, being denied access to things. All of these issues are layered and connected.
I made a decision at 18 that I was going to fight back, and I am 67. I continue that fight.
Black Lives Matter, hands up, don't shoot. I can't breathe. I think we're all answering the same question. What is the worth of a black body in the United States of America?
What do y'all think? It's good? All right, so we're going to have our panelists. So if the panelists, if you could just begin to start making your way up. And I don't have bios up here, so I'm just going to freestyle. So our first panelist is Reverend Mark Blue, and we all know Reverend Blue from his tireless work in our community, not only as a pastor at, what's your church's name in Lackawanna?
Second Baptist Church.
Second Baptist Church in Lackawanna, New York, but also does a lot of things in the city of Buffalo, and he's also the current president of the local branch of the Buffalo NAACP. Let's greet him. Dr. Highland comes to us from Roswell Park, and that's about all I know. But I know he's done a lot of work and research around cancer and is going to be able to give us all the scientific information, facts, and data about how this product is attacking black bodies. Dr. Highland, let's quick greet him.